What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the RotoBaller YouTube channel. I'm Pierre. With me is Nick, and we're going to talk about, of course, fantasy baseball. This time, three up, three down once again, and we're going to focus on xwOBA. And let's give you a quick overview. Nick, xwOBA, not to be confused with xwOBacon, our favorite morning stat. But what is the importance of xwOBA? Why are we going to look at that instead of just plain old batting average?
Oh, no, we're also going to look at batting average. It's super important and one of the bedrock stats. So lots of batting average talk here on WPC Plus. Um, no, WOBA X WOBA. So it's expected WOBA, which WOBA is weighted on base average, which is the far superior stat, popularized and made up by Tom Tango and his crew in his book, The Book. Uh, so it is expected weighted on base and then expected weighted on base average. It, instead of just batting average and straightforward, like what events are worth. Weighted is what it says. It weights each event and gives it more the true value of that event, as opposed to just a single being worth, one base, a double being worth two base, actually worth a little bit more. And so there's a system of weights. It's been proven lots of different ways that WOBA is a superior stat that, like batting average, but also like OPS, which is it's frequently compared to. If you ever want to do something funny and just feel like poking Tom Tango, just get on Twitter and tag him and say something about how OPS is a superior stat, and then just see what happens. I mean, I know what's going to happen. You're going to get a Tango storm of telling you all the ways that WOBA is better. But we're going to talk about xwOBA. So it is expected weighted on base. So that is what a player's weighted on base should have been, given how hard they hit the ball and at what angle they hit the ball. So expected. What should have happened if there wasn't a defense there? If you use the which I know people like, some people kind of poo poo at expected stats, and I get it. They're like, it didn't happen. I only care about what actually happens. But lots of smart people have written about it. Jeff Zimmerman actually wrote at Fangraphs wrote a great article about this 3-4 weeks ago, just talking about, looking at the difference between xwOBA and WOBA, expected weighted on base and weighted on base. That is one of the quickest ways to find out who has been overachieving and who has been underachieving. Just, you're taking luck out of the equation, you're taking fielders out of the equation, you're just saying what should have happened given how hard a player hit a ball and at what angle. And it's just like I said, there's lots of different ways to, find, and there's lots of different expected stats. There's X slug and there's X batting average. And, you mentioned WOBAcon, which is WOBA just on contact. So, taking walks and all non-contact play out of it. So there's lots of different ways to use expected to compare it to actual results, but WOBA, xwOBA, just one of the really simple ways, pretty much universally available now. It's on Baseball Savant, but Fangraphs also gets a lot of Savant's statistics pumped in to the page now too. So xwOBA is on there. It's it's not ubiquitous, but it's getting that way pretty quickly. And just for more serious obsessive fans and just like more casual fans, it's scaled to the same way as batting average and WOBA and everything else. And it's just it's a quick way for us to see, okay, someone has had this much, their WOBA is 400, but their xwOBA is 300. Like something is going on. Like it's not the end all answer. But it is a great starting point for just comparing results to how a player is actually hitting the ball.
Right, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at overachievers and underachievers. We have to look at the actual results, of course, but that's a good way, like you already said, to figure out who might see regression, either positive or negative. So we're going to take a look, three up, three down, of course. We'll start with the overachievers. Before we get into that, though, let me tell you, weekly fantasy baseball is here. That's right, weekly fantasy baseball. DFS, try WFS. You've loved the strategy of season long fantasy sports, but you live for the short term excitement of DFS. Well, you got to try out weekly fantasy baseball on Owner's Box. You may have done it already for NBA, NFL, and now MLB is in the mix as well. Head on over to rotoballer.com/box and sign up today. Our friends at Owner's Box are going to hook you up. All new users get up to $500 deposit match bonus. That's right, $500 match and a free RotoBaller Premium Pass, which is a $99 value. So all you have to do is go to rotoballer.com/box for all the details and sign up today. All right, so let's get into it. We'll start with some xwOBA overachievers, and let's get going with a guy that we talked a lot about in the preseason. We didn't know what exactly to expect. That is Randy Arozarena. You might remember him from, well, let's say the World Series and the whole playoffs where he ripped the cover off the ball. Not quite doing that this year, but he is holding his own. So far the stats have been pretty solid. He's hitting 275. He has 7 homers. He has 5 stolen bases, 24 RBIs, 29 runs. So pretty much a 5 category contributor. But here's the interesting thing. Nick, what if I told you he is overachieving by 66 points, one of the highest right now in the majors in terms of xwOBA? So does that mean you think we're going to see a drop in the average? I also just happened to notice that because I do a weekly Statcast article, and I'm focusing this week on sweet spot percentage. He has one of the lowest sweet spot percentages in the majors too. I don't know if there's going to be a regression on that, but what's your take on Arozarena right now? Because we're not seeing that power binge. Of course, we saw in the playoffs, not that we expected him to hit 50 home runs. But do you think that there could be some regression coming based on the xwOBA?
Yes. I mean, that, like we were talking, I don't want to, completely invalidate everything we're just talking about. Like, it's a couple of big flag, there's a 60-point difference between his wOBA and xwOBA, and maybe a little more tellingly, well, not tellingly, but a 60-point difference when you're starting off at a 400 wOBA and then you have a 340 xwOBA. That is a lot different than, say, Randy Arozarena, who has a 357 wOBA, which is above average, but not like crazily so, and a 296 xwOBA, which is below, if you're looking at around 330 as, depending on the year, what an average wOBA is going to be. So when someone is coming down from a high, they're regressing, but regressing down to a level that's still above average. So it is a little more troubling with Arozarena that his xwOBA is below 300, not great. And same with his wOBA, which is, once again, wOBA just on contact. So, making contact. His wOBA is 403. His xwOBA is 341. So once again, about a 60-point drop, and once again, down into that below average level, because 400 wOBA is going to be around, average. Okay. So that is, those are not great things. He's got 275 batting average. His XBA is 209. Caveat, not really caveat, but one area where and once again, some other smart people have done different research on this, but faster players tend to outperform their xwOBAs, expected stats in general. So I am, Arozarena is down a little bit of sprint speed, but he's still in like the 77 percentile in sprint speed. But if you've seen him play, he's got some serious, like, on-field speed, like, more than maybe shows up in sprint speed. So that's more of a subjective thing for why I'm not that worried about him. Even though his X stats are down, because like you said, he's I worry more about these things on guys that are more category dependent, that are batting average heavy, or maybe they're power heavy with no speed or a low batting average. But Arozarena is giving you a little bit of everything, and so if the batting average comes down some, fine. I'm not worried about the counting stats, because so much of that is dependent on where you're hitting at the order and team around you. And Tampa is fine on those fronts. He's going to steal bases. He'll hit enough power. He has seven home runs right now, and going into Sunday, the 192 PA. So we weren't that what's that pace out to a 20 plus home run season. And that's kind of 25 home runs, 20 stolen bases is really what that's I don't have my exact projections on me, but that's close to about what I'm pretty sure I had Arozarena, like a combined like 45 stolen bases, home runs, with more ceiling on top of that. But it's the other categories he's giving you that really pumps up that value. And he looking at right now, the using the Fangraphs auction calculator for just a standard 12-team league, one catcher league. Arozarena is the 1, 2, 3, 6 number 10 outfielder in earnings. So it's like you look at, and that's something we've talked about before, and why it's so important to calculate values not only when you draft but during the season, and just kind of to see what that boring-ish line looks at, because you're not going to look at Arozarena's line and be like, whoa, that's exactly what I expected out of a top 50 draft pick. They're not 7 stolen bases, five stolen bases, 7 home runs, a 275 average, some counting stats. Like, that doesn't jump off the page, but it's a great thing about 5 category people. You put it all together, calculate some values, and you're like, oh, he is a top 10 outfielder. Like, so maybe it's not this crazy ceiling that we've seen so far, but it's still a top 10 outfielder in like a league-wide offensive depressed environment. So even if like the xwOBA and the xwOBA differences on Arozarena, like, yeah, they're big gaps, but when you combine, well, I'm not worried about as much with fast guys, and you combine that with the 5 category production. So even if, like, say his batting average comes down some, or maybe he hits 1 or 2 fewer home runs than we might expect, I think everything else will get made up for.
Yeah, then like you said, with top 50, a draft pick like him, at least in some leagues, yeah, we always have these expectations, especially based on what we saw the end of last year. He's going to steal 30 bases, he's going to hit 30 home runs. It's not necessarily the case, but he doesn't have to, especially this year. So across the board, he's been a really solid contributor, like you said, and I don't think that's going to change. But to me, it's just interesting. People, you think of the power, right? That's what we saw last year was the power. His best tool is his speed, right? That's always been the case. That's still the case. And he does have power, but he's not going to be a 40 homer guy necessarily. So, move on to a guy who maybe will be. I don't know. Jared Walsh has been on fire this whole season. You figure he's got to slow down at some point. Well, right now, his wOBA is at 400, but his xwOBA is 61 points lower. My follow-up to this question is, the obvious question is he going to regress? And the obvious answer is yes, but how much, right? But with Mike Trout now out, 6 to 8 weeks, is that going to hurt him a little bit more? You think more pressure, he probably benefited quite a bit from having Trout hitting behind him. And so I wonder now if we're going to see that drop happening really soon.
Yeah, it can't be ignored. Like, we say this happens every year. Like, people get hurt. You don't overreact too much to what's happening in the lineup around it, blah, blah, blah. You have to, when it's everyday all-stars, you kind of have to, not just as far as like, oh, line, I think a lot of people have written a lot of things about lineup protection and whether it's real or a myth, but just the general, like, we talk like RBIs, runs, those are a function of where you bat in the lineup and how good the team is around you. That's it's kind of hard to argue that, like, that's why good players on bad teams don't always have great counting stats. Like, that's why that's the thing. That's why we talk about it in draft season. That's why if you're on the Pirates and good, like, you're going to get knocked, because it's natural. It's going to come. It's not about pitchers pitching around you. It's about the people around you and not having as many RBI opportunities, not having as many runs scored opportunities. This is all magnified about 50-fold whenever the person you're missing is Mike Trout, because he's Trout. Like, he does Trout things every year, and he's doing Trout things again this year. And like, I've talked, fantasy trash on him before. That's only because I thought a couple years ago he wasn't going to steal any bases anymore. And you can't be a top 5 fantasy pick in my eyes if you're not going to steal bases. But everything else, he is amazing. So taking fantasy out of it, like, he's still the best player in baseball. Well, I don't know. I have a soft spot for Mr. Acuna, but like, it is going to affect Walsh. Like, there's no way around it. Like, we can make excuses when it's non-Trouts, like, as far as if it will affect them. But going just besides Trout and just going into normal things with Walsh's skills. One, let me say that I was wrong. I did not think he was. I thought he was going to be. We still have plenty of time to see, but I did not buy into Walsh coming into this year. I thought he was a kind of not nearly a quad A player by that stretch, but just an older hitter that had some limitations and was going, could be good and a good real life player, but probably not a fantasy star. And man, he's proven me wrong about 9 different ways so far this year. So I'll cop to that first half, but going back to the WOBA and xwOBA differences, once again, it's a better situation than we were talking about with Arozarena, just because of where the levels are dropping to. So like, his Walsh has a 400 WOBA this year, and like, if you have a 400 WOBA, you're like, that's an amazing number. Like, that's going to be in the group of leaders every year in a normal year if you manage a 400 WOBA. So even with his 50-point drop, he's a 356 xwOBA, and that is still like significantly better than an average number. Like, if he had a 350 WOBA, like, you're gonna probably be happy with that. So the fact that he starts off at a higher level, that makes things a little more palatable. And the same on his WOBA on contact. His WOBA is 470. His xwOBA is 404, which is, once again, down to around in that average range. But there's, I guess, trying to point out with these, different levels of where you're starting and whatnot, is just there's a lot more cushion for when regression. If you're starting off at a 400 WOBA, and there's a lot more, because expected is not actual. Like, we use it as markers, but expected is not actual. It just tells how someone is hitting the ball, and how they are hitting the ball. Like, if you replace that for xwOBA with Jared Walsh's xwOBA says he is hitting the ball at a 340 xwOBA. That is still okay. So the fact that he's having lots of success, and maybe more success than he deserves with how he's hitting the ball, but he's still hitting the ball in an above average manner. So like, that wiggle room, like, makes me like, I don't think the sting of regression as it is will be as bad. He has like a little more troubling, and I mean, I don't think these numbers probably line up exactly with Trout injury. Because what has he been? He's been on the IL now he went on the IL about a week ago. So we are still quite a bit into May, but Walsh is his expected stats have dropped pretty significantly in May, but once again, high levels. Like he has a 75 point difference in May between wOBA and xwOBA. But once again, he's starting at a 400 wOBA. And you look at just his xwOBA, you're like, oh man, his xwOBA is 120 points lower than his wOBA. But his wOBA is 572, which is ridiculous. With a 451 xwOBA, so still significantly above average on both fronts. So he's striking the ball well. He's having great results. We'll have to see how the Trout thing plays out. Luckily, there's still a couple of other really good Angels hitting near him. But when Mike Trout leaves the lineup, like there's going to be a change of some sort. So yeah, something to keep an eye on. But in general, Walsh has been like I don't see a lot of other big flags to say he's going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah, and I think for him it'll be a more of a gradual thing. Like you said, as time goes on, and the counting stats might be a little bit lesser. Obviously, not having Trout around, but yeah, like you said, that cushion. I mean, just to simplify, look, if someone was hitting 400 right now, they could drop 50 points in their batting average. You're still hitting 350. It doesn't matter that you had that massive drop. What matters is you're still way above the league average. He was so high right now, one of the leaders in the xwOBA. And of course, real batting average and RBIs, home runs, and everything else. So he could regress, quite a bit and still be a really solid hitter. Should you sell high on him at this point? Maybe. I'm a little sad because the league I do have him, where he's helping me out quite a bit, is TGFBI, which is the league I can't trade in. So I wouldn't blame somebody for trying to sell on him at this point because he is going to go down at some point, but you don't have to. Now,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Guys like there's a lot of guys like Walsh, like pop-up guys that maybe you were high on him coming in a draft, but man, like trade value is not always going to match what actual value is going to be, especially when you're looking at it through your eyes.
Right.
And Walsh is one of those guys that it's going to be hard to find someone that is just really excited to trade for Jared Walsh. And like, it's going to be hard because I don't think he's a guy. Once again, you can apply this to a lot of the type players in these type situations. Like, I don't think there's going to be a significant drop off with Walsh. I think there will be a drop off, but like I'm not selling high on him because like I don't think the low is going to be that low. So for me to come out ahead, like profit wise, like I need to find someone that really, really, really likes Jared Walsh, that not only basically believes what he's put up in 8 weeks is what he's going to put up for the rest of the year, and be willing to trade for that value. Because and a lot of guys, like a lot of people aren't. They're not going to give him that. They're definitely not going to give you that kind of value, and they're probably going to give you something significantly less because they're like, he's Jared Walsh. Of course he's going to get worse. Why would I want to pay fair value for him? So yeah, that kind of, I think a lot about trades and how to get trades done, and I think that's a situation. Like, you have to know not just what players to trade, but what kind of players to trade. And Jared Walsh is like, maybe someone in your league is a big time Walsh fan, but if not, like, enjoy the profits you're getting from him being on your team, and just write it out.
Yeah, because he's a guy you didn't spend a high draft pick on, and like you said, there's no name recognition.
Free money.
There's no people aren't going to pay through the nose for him. And very similar, our last one as far as up is Yermin Mercedes. Now, I will say I did recommend selling high on him. There's a Fantasy Pros article that just came out a few days ago. One of those little expert polls they asked, and I did name him by name. Now, similar, kind of a late age breakout guy here, someone who wasn't a huge prospect. He's just tearing the cover off the ball, leading the majors in batting average. Insane stats to start out, 407 WOBA right now. But of course, he's one of the biggest overachievers. Um, I don't know what you would get because again, is somebody really going to just pay up and expect him to continue this all season? I don't know. Again, that lineup also missing not just Eloy Jimenez for the whole season, but now Luis Robert is gone for the whole season pretty much too. So, things are not looking great, even though the White Sox somehow are still, killing it offensively. Mercedes, we know he's going to regress, but let me get your take on just how much and what do you believe in him? Because we really didn't even see, like with Walsh last year, we saw that little streak at the end. This is the first we've really seen of Mercedes, so I wonder what you think he's going to be worth going forward.
It is hard to believe that there's not a cliff coming. As opposed to Walsh, like you mentioned, we saw a small body of success, and that doesn't automatically guarantee future success, but it's like with Mercedes, for one, I love what he's doing. He's fun. He's I love anyone who's love of fun tweaks Tony La Russa. That's one of my favorite qualities in a player, is when they can make Tony La Russa curse in his head about some unwritten rule or another. And Yermin's just like, I am Yermin. I'm going to be Yermin. I'm going to hit 3-0 home runs from meatballs off of Williams Studio. Like, I am Yermin. So that's fun and exciting for fantasy. I thought he was going to dip back before. I mean, honestly, the time, hindsight being 2020 and whatnot, the time to sell him was a month ago or 3 weeks ago, which is usually the smarter moves for pop-up guys like this. But once again, who was going to trade you a bunch for Yermin Mercedes 3 weeks ago? No one. Just like no one was going to trade you for Akil Badu. Like there's Badu has fallen back there. Mercedes hasn't yet. But these guys, it's hard to trade away, sell high on guys like this in April, just because you're never going to get value. So you're basically just going to give them away, betting yourself that he's going to be worthless. So that's the only way trades can happen like that in April. And now it's, you're once again probably not going to be able to get anything. Once again, same reasons, name value, just this, that, late blooming hitter, yada yada. I like his I never got into him that much when he was first blowing up, but it was less about skills and more about just playing time. Just like, okay, this was pre Eloy and pre Robert and all that, when Andrew Vaughn still couldn't even get playing time, and you just see all these playing time battles coming up, and you're like, okay, as soon as Mercedes takes a dip, so is his playing time. Injuries have forced the White Sox hand on this, as well as Mercedes just keeps hitting, so that kind of forces the hand. But we're already kind of seeing the dip. He has a 407 WOBA on the year, a 356 xwOBA. Both of those fine. Once again, his xwOBA is still above average, but that is for the year. And in May, he is taking a significant dip. So far in May, he has a 321 WOBA, 283 xwOBA. So starting, WOBA below average, xwOBA basement level, and same on WOBACON. So he has a 368 WOBACON, far below average, and a 314 xwOBACON, way basement level below average. So the dip is happening, and there's not if you're Yermin Mercedes owner, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to know when to pull the plug, basically, if he keeps declining like this. And you're not going to trade for him. You're not going to he's going to be on your roster for a little bit regardless. But it's just guys like this know when to pull the plug, like know when to, going back to like value-based drafting and turning, five categories into $1 number. And it's, don't throw all your profits out the window because you're, like going back to Badu, starts off crazy hot, gets crazy cold, losing playing time, yada, yada. Know when to pull the plug. Like, don't wait an extra week of, because you think about it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm making these numbers up, but Mercedes, oh, you kind of psychologically you think, all right, well, he has these. I got all these counting stats and this batting average when he was good, and then okay, he's had a bad couple of weeks, and batting average is way down. But you kind of look at things, you're like, oh, okay, he's only hit one home run and only has a couple RBIs and runs, and kind of in your head you're like, okay, that's not, it's not the explosion he had before, but it's, it's still a couple of things, a couple of numbers, that's not hurting me. But then when you look at it on a value base, when you combine all those things together, and when someone really slumps for a couple weeks that you could be benching like Badu, or, if Mercedes dips down, when you take that into account, you're like, oh man, so, he was a $20 earner for that first month, and then he's been and now when you add that first month into his past 2 weeks where he's been a negative $10 earner, like, oh, now he's a $10 earner, and now I'm going to bench him. Like, don't let that, like, when you're riding a hot hand like this, like, you can't just bench him the second they have an 0 for 4 night, because it's baseball and he might hit a home run the next night. But when they've had a 2 for 23, and it's one of these pop-up guys that aren't super successful, and there's always been worry like, okay, how long is it going to last? Is it going to last? Like, when you see that, like, get out of that slump. Like, with our high draft picks, with our name guys, we gotta eat some of the pain when they're going through slumps, because like, this, we draft them because they are good, and eventually these things will even out. But to really kind of get the most profit off of these guys that you didn't pay much for, and you're just trying to get a month or two of great production, cut bait. Like, don't do it too late. Like, don't let another 3 days go by when in your stomach you're like, oh man, the ride is over. Like, ride's over. Like, you can start to feel it. Like, okay, this person isn't for real. Baseball is very hard. They just didn't become an all-star after not being an all-star for 8 years. Like, okay, they're back to what they were. Cut bait. You don't have to cut them. You don't have to start them. Like, you don't. I've written about this before with pitchers, but it's the same thing with hitters. Like, you give them a longer leash, but you don't. If Mercedes keeps going and he ends May kind of like how he's been in May, and it's time, slide him to your bench for a week. Like, you can find a replacement level that's not batting 100. I'm not saying that's what he's doing, but when these guys dive, they tend to dive pretty hard. So eject, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Cut the cord. Yeah, know when to cut bait. Definitely a lesson to be learned. And you know what? Pitchers make adjustments. A lot of it's pitchers don't know how to attack him because they haven't seen him, right? And so then they figure
literally haven't seen him.
Yeah, like, not at all. And so then the book goes out on the guy, and when they can't adjust back, that's when you know. Okay, so
like, most Jose Bautista ruined this for people, by the way. Like,
sure,
baseball players usually don't get. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm just glad Odor's back in the league. So if Bautista gets out of line again, he can sock him right in the jaw. But Bautista really, like, is like, oh, hitters can break out and be fantasy superstars at 26, 27, 28. Like, yeah, they can. It doesn't happen very often, especially with hitters, because baseball is really hard, and we usually after they've played professional baseball for 5+ years, we can get a decent idea of what we're dealing with. And ever since Bautista, now people are like, someone pops up that can hit, they're like, oh, late blooming hitter, like late blooming hitter. Like, yeah, there's plenty of late blooming hitters, but there's plenty of guys that bloom for a couple months, and then, like you were saying, all the pitchers are like, oh, hello, batter that I've never seen before. Now I've seen you before, and I'm going to throw you my stinkiest cheese, and you're going to bat zero. Like, that's kind of how this goes, and maybe he adjusts back. It's, it's the best thing about baseball, the constant game of adjustments. But the reason hitters bloom late usually is because their ceiling as a hitter is lower.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with Mercedes, but yeah, that's definitely keep a close eye. That's for sure. Sell if you can, but again, every league is different. You, the educated RotoBaller viewer and listener and reader, you know better. You're not going to buy that. All right, so let's get to our other side of the coin here. The underachievers, possibly due to rise, but let's see. Tommy Pham has a lot of rising to do. Currently batting 193. My sources tell me that's not good. And in May, his wOBA is really bad too. It's 298. So why should we buy into this? Well, his xBA, in terms of batting average, is 253. His xwOBA, at least for May, is 381. So there's some huge discrepancies there. But then season long, he is one of the biggest underachievers in xwOBA, 83-point differential. So here's the thing with Pham, and you know this, of course, as a Cardinals fan. The power is probably not going to come back. I don't see the power coming back because he was never really a power hitter to begin with. He had those 20-plus homer seasons a couple years ago. He does have speed, and he's in San Diego, so he will get stolen bases just by default. But do you buy enough into the Pham as a guy who, probably anybody who has Pham is just happy to get rid of him at this point? Do you think he's got enough juice left in him that you would buy for the rest of the season?
I'm worried. Don't please, no one tell Tommy Pham. If you know Tommy Pham, don't tell him that I'm worried about him, because I don't want Tommy Pham showing up to my house like punching me in the stomach. If you don't know anything about Pham, he has one of the world's biggest chips on his shoulder, and he's fueled by your hate. So if you want Pham to do better, just talk a bunch of trash about him, and I'm sure he will start taking it out on us. But putting that aside, I'm like, there's some worrisome things in his profile that, like, he still has great plate discipline, but like you said, you were talking about, we never thought that, like, he was going to be, he's like, going back to Arozarena, like, we never expected him to be a 40 home run guy, but it's his fantasy value is wrapped up in the fact that he does a little bit of everything pretty good. And, the siren song of power and speed, and you don't have to be Ron Acuna and go 30-30, like 2020 with a decent batting average gets you a lot of fantasy value. And he's hit one home run this year, and his exit velocities are, his averages aren't down that much, but we've talked before about he's hitting the ball more in the air than he has before. This year he still has it's not a career high anymore, but he's got a 7.7 degree average launch angle. That's his highest since 2016. He's never been a big launch angle guy, and now he is getting under the ball more. He's hitting more fly balls, but at the same time, his like top end exit velocities are down. We've talked before about not just average exit velocity, but average exit velocity of just balls hit in the air, and then the percent of balls that you hit in the air that are at 100 miles per hour or over. And looking at, the best years of Pham, looking at average EV on fly balls, he was at his best like 2017, 2019. Average EV on air balls, 93rd percentile, 94th percentile in 2018, 86th in 2019, 89th last year. This year down to 63rd. Same thing with air percent of balls hit over 100 miles per hour. Starting in 2017, 95th percentile, 80th percentile, 84th, 79th, down to 64th again this year. So he's hitting more balls in the air, but he is not hitting them nearly as hard as he used to. And it's just guys like this, when they are so, it's not where like a power hitter is super dependent on home runs. So when he takes a dip on home runs, he's like, the value just falls out. Pham gives you a lot, he isn't over reliant on one category, but like when one of those table legs kind of falls out, and it's, home runs are connected to runs, RBIs and whatnot. When one of those falls out, and it's like, okay, now he goes from, getting his collective value from getting a decent chunk in each category to now getting a tiny chunk out of each category. And one of the categories is a complete sink. Like it's not like it's one home run. So he's not only getting like a small decrease across the board, one of those categories has fallen in a hole, and his underlying like exit velocity metrics don't say that he's digging out of that hole anytime soon. So while I do think that, the large, big differences between his xwOBA, xwOBA, wOBA, xwOBA, what we were talking about, the expected stats go more into those above average ranges. So like, I think the batting, I think everything will come back a little bit, I guess, is the hedge answer, but I don't think the power will. So
I definitely don't see the power coming back. But like you said, the thing is, if the power isn't there, and right now the batting average is not even close to being there. I mean, it's talk about a sink. I mean, he's really sinking you in two categories for sure. He would have to really make up for it by stealing a lot of bases, right, to even have that value. Well, okay, that's not going to happen if he's hitting below 200. You're not getting on base at a really high rate. Mm-hmm. And I don't see the regression.
He's batting down in the order too. Like it's
right. It's not going to happen to the extent that you need it to, where you can actually put him in your lineup on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree, and it's it's like, we talked about it, it's like, Jared Walsh, Yermin Mercedes. Probably going to be hard to trade those guys. Same kind of thing with Pham, but at the same time, you might get some more fish on that hook because, one, he's had fancy success before. Two, he has a name. Three, he plays for one of the best offensive teams in baseball. And four, his like carrying like traits are the power speed combo, which is intoxicating to many fantasy players. So like maybe, you're still gonna, like, obviously you're not gonna get value, but you can get some value, I think, from Pham in a lot of leagues, just because there's a narrative that you can spin there that, even if you don't believe he's going to bounce back, like his, like where he contributes with the power and the speed and the team he's on and what he's done before, you can find a narrative there. Like, if someone is looking to trade for some upside,
and don't forget draft capital.
It's trying to shoot the moon. Yeah.
Even though it's completely wrong and illogical and stupid, it's, I spend a whatever top 100 pick on this guy, or I don't know where he went. I didn't draft Pham anywhere, so I don't really know. Maybe around 120, I guess. I mean, it depends how much you bought into him. But okay, so I drafted this guy to be a starter, so therefore I value him more than whatever. Jared Walsh, I drafted at the end of the, or nobody drafted Yermin Mercedes, right? So anything you get there is just gravy. But yeah, people will cling to that, right? Pham has value because I thought he would preseason, which all right.
Yeah, and man, it's like trades. It's about what they're doing, but it's also about the narrative and the story you can tell, and it's not story like trying to rip someone off. Like, I think really hard about trades. Like I really, I'm trying to put myself in the other person's shoes and like what they would find attractive and what they're trying to do, how my offer makes sense to them. And Pham is, you can spin a lot of, hey, look at these X stats, hey, look at this team, hey, look at power, speed, like look at what he's done before. All he has to do is come up a little bit, and you're making out like a bandit. Like it's you can get that trade done. Maybe not like trying to trade Tommy Pham a 1-for-1 with someone, but as far making multiplayer deals where you don't need to get 80 cents on the dollar for Tommy Pham. But if you don't believe, like if I don't have him anywhere because I didn't believe in him even a little bit. But if I had Tommy Pham right now, like, and I can get 40 cents on the dollar, like stapled into some other trade that gets a trade done, yeah, all day. Like I'm those are the sell lows that I like to do, is when I'm not just selling low to doing a 1-for-1 for some junky whatever. I like to sell low when it's he's a sweetener into something. He's helping get a deal done. He's, hey, like hey trade partner, like you don't need Tommy Pham to be amazing for this trade to work out. But if he comes back, like this trade really works out for you. Like, so that's a narrative you can use to get a trade done. And if you're looking to dump Pham, which I think you should be, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I definitely would be, again, if I had him on any rosters. But now, similar, let's talk about an outfielder who went around the similar range. I know you were big on preseason. I bought into a rebound. It's not quite happening. Now, his power numbers per se aren't too bad, but Jorge Soler is definitely not living up to expectations. Also hitting under 200. Now, with Pham, I think the lesson here is that just when we say, oh, someone's underachieving, they're even due for positive regression. Yeah, it doesn't mean they'll be actual good and that you want them. So, but is Soler, since we know what his ceiling is, do you still believe in him? Because I know you had a strong belief in him preseason. Do you think he'll get back to the point where he needs to be to return value, not just from homers and RBIs?
So annoying. I'm pretty disappointed in Soler so far. No, I'm going to hold out hope. I mean, obviously there's a lot of hope in his X stats. But he starts so low that it's kind of reverse. He starts so low, it's like even the big jump doesn't make him that impressive. He has a 268 WOBA, a 333 xwOBA. It's like, oh great, it's 65 points higher, but his xwOBA is still like very, very average. And same with his and this is to be expected with how hard he hits the ball. And that's kind of what you're banking on with Soler is, his wOBA, there's a even bigger gap. Like his wOBA is 340, which is very below average. Like that's pretty junky. But his xwOBA is 451. And when you think about that tracks logically when you think about Soler, just because he is still hitting the ball extremely hard. So yeah, his expected wOBA on contact should be quite a bit higher. And in May it's kind of been the same thing. Like he has a 295 wOBA in May, which is once again just terribly bad, but still a 444 xwOBA compared to 451 on the year. So yeah, I'm gonna keep believing it. Just like he hits the ball crazy hard. Like even when exit velocity isn't everything, but for a guy whose power I really believe in, and he's still hitting the ball crazy hard in a bad offensive environment, in a bad offensive home park for home runs, which Kauffman Stadium is, even though it's actually kind of above average for like doubles, singles, triples, and whatnot. It's a home run suppressing park. It's colder weather. It's a decreased offensive environment, but he's still hitting the ball wicked hard. So I'm gonna keep riding those X stats and hope they turn into real stats. I mean, it's some exit velocity stuff is trickier comparing in the past years just because of the new ball and the bounciness versus how far the ball carries and whatnot. So like the fact that his max, you go to his Savant page, it's his exit velocity, you're still a C or red. his max EVs in the top 5% of the league. His average exit velocity is top 3% of the league. His hard hit rate is top 5% of the league. Jorge Soler is never going to hit the ball soft. So as the weather warms up and offenses hopefully are starting to come around more, I'll bet on Soler coming back, and he is a guy as far as like trade goes. Yeah, I'm trying to buy low because you're not going to have to pay very much for him. Like going back to that, draft capital may not mean very much, but it does to a lot of people when they're ever making trades. And if Soler had like a 150 ADP, but it was also like I got him in drafts at 140. I got him in some drafts like 170. So a lot of people picked him up as their like fifth outfielder. Drafted him as their fourth or fifth outfielder, and we're drafting him with the like high upside. Like, okay, I don't have to spend a lot. This could really work out for me. And now those same people are sitting with Soler, having not spent very much on him and not gotten the upside production they wanted, like in that immediate hit of the first 8 weeks of the season. Yeah, those guys are probably not going to charge you very much if you'd like to trade for Soler. And those are the situations I like to attack because, if you're, it's the same as, it's the same reasoning behind when you draft someone late. It's like low cost. And if you're paying a quarter for him and you think he's going to be worth $1 when the weather heats up, which I happen to think he is, because once again, he hits the ball very hard. So, so he is a guy that's just, people aren't going to have a lot of attachment to him, and they've seen 8 weeks of pretty bad production. Like those guys, even if they don't work out, like those are the high ROI guys in trades that you want to target.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I do believe he's still definitely hitting the ball hard. 54%, and he's been among the hard hit leaders the last several years. You got me thinking. You talked about Kaufman. Obviously not a hitter's paradise, but I looked up because now Statcast has expected home runs. He's hit 4 home runs. It's not a lot for a guy who hoping for 40 from. Expected home runs at 7.6, so that's quite a bit more. But looking, they have expected home runs by park. So in Kansas City, it's 4, which makes sense. In Houston, it would be 10. Right, he would have hit 10 of the same. Let's see, Wrigley Field 11, and you look across the board, you see 10 in Fenway, which is hard to believe. 10 in Chicago, 10 in Philadelphia, and there's several that are 9 and 8. So, that definitely checks out the fact that his home park is not doing him any favors, but also the fact is that he really could and should be doing a lot better in the power department. So, maybe more road games, maybe just a little better luck, maybe maybe the weather helps him out, but there's definitely more power to come. But it's not that he isn't hitting the ball as hard as he was. He still is. So that's definitely something that's promising. And let's finish with a guy who's hitting the ball really hard, but a very, very small sample. What are your thoughts on Alex Kiriloff? Because, he started, 0 for 15, I think, his brief appearance, and then he went on a home run binge, and then he got hurt. And now, what do we expect from him from here on out?
I like him quite a bit. I have him in a couple dynasty leagues and have him in some redraft this year just because it's kind of expected he was going to come up, and he's been sidelined with the wrist injury, but that is I think last I checked has started a rehab assignment or is getting ready, but it's an imminent return. And considering how it's so funny how baseball always seems to shake out, and it's just like going into the years, like there are a lot of questions about Minnesota just having too many hitters and too many spots and too many good prospects that just weren't going to see time, and voila, just like things happen every year, people get injured, the best hitters end up coming up and doing more playing. And that's what Kiriloff is, and he has a beautiful swing. I don't know how much of our listeners have watched it, but he's had that beautiful swing for a while, and so I'm pretty high on him. Like looking at the crazy small sample size because he's only had 53 plate appearances, but he has a 336 wOBA. Average is a 473 xwOBA. That is very, very, very good. And same with his batting average. He has a 240 batting average, a 340 xBA, and then wOBA on contact, a 443 wOBA, above average, by a significant amount, 641 xwOBA. So, totally unsustainable. All this is small sample nonsense, but it tells you how like the guy has a great hit tool and has great power. Like this has been in his prospect profile for a while. So the fact that he gets to the majors and hits the ball really, really, has it, success has been up and down, but once again, very small sample. But the fact that he is just hitting the ball hard and just on the screws, like basically since he played his first game, like that is very encouraging. And so if he's in like, if you're in a deep, 15 team league, like he's not available, but a lot of 12 team leagues, he is available because and this is a similar situation with a lot of people, is that with these bevy of injuries that we've had and just overloaded with injuries, and you have to make tough cut decisions because you just need warm bodies. And guys like, I was writing this about Carson Kelly last week for my point stuff, but it was like, yeah, he's probably not going to be on your wire, but looking at the waiver wire right now, he's 65% on ESPN, and he was like 70% on Yahoo. It's like some people, no matter how good Carson Kelly was doing, some people couldn't afford to keep an injured catcher around. And it's the same thing with outfielders. Like some people can't afford even a high touted top prospect like Kiriloff, who came up and hit some homers. Like he has a wrist problem. Like some people just can't, you got to make that cut. And that's why his, I think this morning when I checked in 12 team league in Yahoo and ESPN, he was both at like 40-45%. So yeah, a lot of leagues he's not going to be available in, but over half he's going to be because of that. It's not always a matter of talent. It's just a matter of roster crunches with people. If you don't L slots in your league or you don't have deep benches, like how long can you keep around a rookie that that has a wonky wrist that you don't know if he's going to come back and be good? Like those guys get cut. So go check your wire. Like don't assume that Kiriloff has been snatched up because he's been on the shelf for a couple weeks, and memories get short with fantasy. So yeah, if he's sitting around, go pick him up. Like there's not a real there's not a downside to this. Like go, if he has big rookie stumbles soon, you can throw him right back on. But he has true skills pedigree. Like this isn't a pop-up guy. This is a guy that we've seen coming for quite a while, as far as the hit tool goes. So yeah, I'd roster him on all formats if he is available.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And we're going to talk about that actually in a different video. Waiver wire guys who might be available that absolutely shouldn't be. And so he's definitely one. If he's, yeah, he absolutely might be because, like you said, I mean, if anybody here hasn't got to the point where you get that too many IL listed error message because you're trying to put so many guys on your injured list and you just don't have space, then I guess you're having really good luck so far. But yeah, he could definitely be available because it was a short time that he was up and before getting hurt and we didn't know when he was coming back. So look for him for sure. That's definitely somebody I agree. You've got to go out and get him. Not the best year for the Twins. Also, that helps. People are just going to be down on that offense because they're just not looking very good. But yeah, he's a guy who definitely has the pedigree. All right. Well, that does it for 3 up and 3 down. Going into depth for expected weighted on base average. Of course, this is the WPC Plus, which is the weighted pod created by us. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.